For years, olive oil has been treated like a safety blanket. If it's on your plate, you feel like you made a smart choice. You don't question it. But the body you have now doesn't respond to olive oil the same way it used to. And that's where small problems quietly begin. I'm not here to tell you to stop using olive oil. The issue is that many people after 60 are using the right food in the wrong way, then wondering why meals leave them feeling heavy or sluggish. Most of the time, it's not about discipline. It's about habits no one ever corrected. In this video, we're going through 6 common olive oil mistakes, counting down from number 6 to number 1. Before we start, leave a comment and tell me how you usually use olive oil. I read every one, and I respond, because this channel is about real bodies, not rules. Now let's begin with the mistake almost everyone overlooks. Mistake number 6, using olive oil long after opening. There's a familiar moment many people notice after certain meals. You don't feel sick, nothing hurts, but you feel heavier than expected, and that heaviness seems to linger longer than it used to. Most people assume that's just part of getting older, so they move on without questioning it. What often goes unnoticed is that the issue isn't the meal itself. It's something quietly changed around it. Once a bottle of olive oil is opened, it begins reacting with air every time the cap comes off. Not in a dramatic way, not overnight, just gradually, in the background, long before the oil looks or smells bad. Over time, the parts of olive oil that once made it gentle on digestion start to fade. The oil still works as fat, but it no longer behaves the same way in the body. After 60, when digestion and fat tolerance are already less forgiving, that difference becomes easier to feel, even if you can't quite explain why. This pattern was frequently observed by Dr. Mary Flynn, who worked closely with older adults following Mediterranean-style eating patterns. She noticed that many people who complained that olive oil no longer sat right were using the same opened bottle for months. They weren't overeating. They weren't cooking differently. They were simply using oil that had quietly lost what made it supportive in the first place. When those same individuals switched to fresher oil in smaller bottles, many reported that meals felt lighter again without changing anything else. That's why this mistake often shows up as a feeling rather than a symptom. A slow digestion, a dull fullness, less energy after eating. Nothing sharp or alarming, just a subtle signal the body sends before the mind catches up. The adjustment here isn't drastic. Olive oil isn't something you buy once and forget about. Freshness matters, not just for taste, but for how your body responds afterward. If meals have started feeling heavier lately, this is one of the first habits worth reconsidering. And even when olive oil is fresh, there's another everyday habit that can quietly work against it. That brings us to the next mistake. Mistake number 5. Storing olive oil the wrong way. Some meals don't feel wrong at first. They just sit heavier than they should. Energy doesn't come back the same way. And when that happens, most people start questioning the food, not realizing the issue may be coming from something far more ordinary. Where olive oil is stored makes a difference much sooner than people expect. When oil is kept near heat and light, especially next to the stove, it begins changing almost immediately. Not enough to smell bad, not enough to taste off, but enough to lose the properties that once made it easy on digestion. After 60, when the digestive system is less forgiving, that loss becomes easier to feel. One woman I spoke with, Karen, 66, had used olive oil daily for years without any trouble. Recently, she noticed certain meals left her feeling unusually heavy and uncomfortable, even though she hadn't changed what she cooked. Portions were the same. Ingredients were the same. The only detail she hadn't considered was where her oil lived. It sat in a clear bottle on the counter, right beside the stove, absorbing heat and light every day. Once she moved the oil into a darker, cooler cabinet and stopped leaving it exposed during cooking, meals began feeling lighter again within a few weeks. Nothing else changed. No new foods, no restrictions, just a small adjustment that removed constant stress from the oil before it ever reached her plate. That's the key point here. This isn't about perfection or buying something new. Olive oil behaves best when it's treated like a sensitive ingredient, not a permanent countertop item. Cooler, darker storage helps preserve what your body actually responds to after eating. But even when olive oil is stored correctly, problems can still show up if the oil itself isn't the right kind to begin with. And that takes us straight to the next mistake. Mistake number 4. Choosing the wrong type of olive oil. Most people think olive oil is olive oil. If the label says it, the bottle feels safe. That belief is exactly where many people lose the benefits they think they're getting, especially later in life. Not all olive oil supports the body in the same way, even though it's sold that way. Extra virgin olive oil is minimally processed. It still carries natural compounds that help the body recognize it as more than just fat. Refined olive oil is different. It's been heavily processed using heat and chemicals that strip away most of those compounds. What's left is mostly calories, with very little biological signal for digestion or recovery to respond to. That difference showed up clearly for Paul, 71. He told me he'd been using olive oil every day and assumed it was helping because it always had. Over time, meals started leaving him feeling heavier and less steady afterward. When he finally looked closely at the bottle he'd been buying, it wasn't extra virgin at all. It was a refined oil marketed with words like pure and light. Once he switched to a true extra virgin olive oil and kept everything else the same, meals began feeling easier again within a few weeks. This mistake is common because marketing makes it easy. Labels sound reassuring, bottles look clean, and refined oils taste mild. But that mildness often means the oil no longer carries the compounds the body actually responds to, especially after 60. The adjustment here isn't complicated. Olive oil works best when it still has something to offer beyond calories. Choosing oil that's truly extra virgin gives the body clearer signals and helps explain why some meals feel supportive while others don't. And even with the right oil in your kitchen, there's another everyday habit that quietly changes how the body handles it. That brings us to the next mistake. Mistake number 3. Believing more olive oil is always better. At some point, healthy quietly turns into too much. Olive oil earns its reputation, so people stop paying attention to how much they're using. A drizzle becomes a pour. A pour becomes routine. And because nothing feels wrong right away, the amount slowly creeps up without notice. The body doesn't see olive oil as a wellness claim. It sees fat, dense, slow to process. When digestion isn't as efficient as it once was, excess fat lingers longer than it should. Meals start to feel heavier. Energy dips show up later in the day. Sometimes weight creeps up, even though food choices still look clean on paper. I noticed this pattern with my mother and eventually brought it up to her. She genuinely believed she was doing everything right. Home-cooked meals, plenty of vegetables, olive oil on almost everything. Lately, she had been feeling more sluggish after meals and noticed her energy dropping earlier in the day. Nothing in her diet looked wrong, so she assumed it was just age. When we looked closer together, the issue wasn't what she was eating. It was how often olive oil showed up. It wasn't just used for cooking. It was added to vegetables, grains, proteins, sometimes more than once in the same meal. I suggested she slightly reduce the amount without cutting olive oil out completely. Within a short time, meals stopped sitting as heavy, and her energy felt steadier afterward. That's what makes this mistake easy to miss. Olive oil carries a good fat reputation, so it rarely gets questioned. But too much of any fat can overwhelm digestion, especially when it appears in every meal. The body doesn't complain loudly. It just slows down. The adjustment here isn't restriction. It's awareness. Olive oil supports the body best within a certain range. Stay there, and it helps with comfort and satiety. Go past it, and the body shifts toward storage and fatigue instead. And even when the amount feels reasonable, the way olive oil is used during cooking can still create problems most kitchens never think about. That brings us to the next mistake. Mistake number 2. Cooking with olive oil at high temperatures. Heat changes olive oil more than most people expect. Once temperatures climb too high, the oil's structure begins to break down. What was once supportive becomes harder for the body to handle, even when the food itself still looks perfectly fine on the plate. This mistake feels normal simply because it's been common for years. Many people assume olive oil is built for frying or long, high-heat cooking. Over time, though, repeated exposure to high heat causes oxidation. The beneficial compounds degrade, and new byproducts form that the body has to work harder to process. For someone with a slower digestive system, that extra effort often shows up as heaviness, mild reflux, or fatigue after eating. I've seen this play out clearly with someone named John, 72. He cooked nearly every meal at home and used olive oil for everything, especially pan-frying and long sautés. He wasn't overeating. His ingredients were clean. But meals cooked on the stove consistently left him feeling heavier and less comfortable than meals prepared other ways. He assumed it was age and never questioned the oil. When we looked at how he was cooking, the issue wasn't olive oil itself. It was the heat. Olive oil was being pushed far beyond what it handles well, meal after meal. I suggested a simple adjustment: olive oil for lower heat and finishing. More heat-stable fats when higher temperatures were needed. Nothing else changed. Within a short time, John noticed meals felt easier to digest, and the post-meal heaviness became far less common. The food didn't change. The timing and heat did. That's why this mistake isn't about avoiding olive oil. It's about respecting how heat changes it. Used gently, olive oil supports the body. Pushed too hard, too often, it quietly works against digestion. And even when temperature, quantity, and oil choice are handled correctly, there's still one deeper belief that causes people to misuse olive oil without realizing it. That brings us to the final mistake. Mistake number 1. Replacing all other fats with olive oil. This is the mistake that causes the most confusion because it feels like the safest decision. People hear that olive oil is healthy, so they commit to it completely. Every meal, every pan, every drizzle. Other fats slowly disappear, not because they were harmful, but because they were quietly avoided. The body doesn't thrive on loyalty to a single food. Different fats play different roles, and when olive oil becomes the only option, balance starts to slip. Digestion can feel strained. Appetite cues blur. Meals that once felt satisfying begin to feel oddly heavy or incomplete, even though everything still looks healthy. One woman in her early 70s described it this way: olive oil had slowly replaced every other fat in her kitchen. Cooking, baking, even reheating leftovers, it was always the default. Over time, she began saying something many people recognize: I eat healthy, but food doesn't sit right anymore. Nothing in her meals looked wrong, which made it frustrating to understand. When the focus shifted away from olive oil itself and toward balance, things changed. Once other fats were reintroduced where they made more sense, while olive oil stayed part of the mix instead of the entire solution, meals started feeling more complete again. Digestion improved. Energy felt steadier. Nothing extreme changed, just the return of variety. This matters even more later in life. when the body becomes more sensitive to how nutrients work together. Olive oil supports the body best when it's part of a broader fat landscape, not when it replaces everything else. The real lesson here isn't about olive oil at all. It's about listening. Healthy eating isn't about finding one right food and sticking to it forever. It's about noticing how your body responds and adjusting over time. When that becomes the goal, food stops feeling confusing and starts making sense again. If this helped you see olive oil differently, tap like so more people can find this video. Share it with someone who's trying to eat healthy but still doesn't feel great afterward. And subscribe to the channel for clear, grounded guidance that helps you understand your body, not follow rules.